She grabbed the wrong suitcase at the airport. Never knew it belonged to a millionaire CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The sliding doors of the Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport opened with a hiss, letting in the rush of cool evening air and the hum of hundreds of travelers. Under the fluorescent lights, Elena Rossi tightened her scarf and hurried toward the baggage carousel. She had been awake for 17 hours, her head pounding from jet lag and cheap airplane coffee. The carousel began to move, clattering with black and gray suitcases. Elena's eyes darted from one to another until she saw a black hard-shell case with a silver tag. Same model, same scratch near the handle. She reached for it, heaved it off the belt, and sighed in relief. Finally, she murmured, brushing her hair from her face. She did not notice the small gold monogram AC, embossed near the zipper. Outside, the chill of early spring bit through her coat as she hailed a cab. Her tiny apartment in the Latin Quarter smelled faintly of paint and burnt toast. She dropped the suitcase beside her easel, kicked off her boots, and went straight for the kitchen, craving tea more than anything. Only when the kettle began to whistle did she notice the tag swinging from the suitcase handle, Coal Dynamics Private Travel. Her brows furrowed. That's not me. Kneeling, she unzipped the case. Inside were perfectly folded suits, a silver laptop with a gold C engraved on the lid, and a folder labeled Confidential Urban Renaissance Project. Her heart thudded. Oh no, oh no, no, no. She scrambled for her phone, ready to call the airline, when a business card slipped from the side pocket. Adrian Cole, Chief Executive Officer. Elena stared at the name, her pulse quickening. You have got to be kidding me. She pressed her palms against her temples, half laughing, half panicking. A millionaire's suitcase, sitting in her messy studio apartment. For a long moment she just stood there, staring at the sleek black case as if it might explode. Then she whispered, I will return it tomorrow. But tomorrow felt very far away, and curiosity was already whispering louder than reason. She lifted the laptop slightly. It was heavier than she expected. On the screen, the faint glow of a paused presentation images of futuristic buildings and the words, Reimagining Human Spaces. Elena exhaled, heart racing. Whoever this man was, he lived in a world galaxies away from hers. She closed the lid, her reflection flickering in the screen-tired eyes, paint on her sleeve, a girl barely holding things together. That is it, she told herself, snapping the case shut. I am returning it first thing in the morning. But deep down, she had no idea that this wrong suitcase, this single mistake, was about to rewrite everything she thought she knew about luck, destiny, and love. The next morning, gray light spilled through the curtains of Elena's small apartment. The suitcase sat by the door like a secret waiting to be confessed. She had barely slept, replaying the discovery again and again, Adrian Cole, CEO, confidential documents, and that impossible coincidence. She brewed coffee strong enough to wake a ghost, then dialed the airline's lost and found desk. The agent's polite voice said they could not release passenger information for privacy reasons. Elena hung up with a sigh. Of course not, because that would be too easy. She looked at the business card again. The address read Coal Dynamics, Rue Montparnasse, Paris. The idea of walking into a millionaire's office with his suitcase made her stomach twist, but guilt was louder than fear. She changed into a clean sweater, tied her hair, and stepped out into the pale morning drizzle. The lobby of Coal Dynamics felt like another world white marble, tall glass panels and quiet efficiency. The receptionist glanced up with a professional smile. Do you have an appointment, mademoiselle? Not exactly, Elena admitted, clutching the handle of the suitcase. I just need to return this. It belongs to Mr. Cole. The woman's eyes widened slightly. Mr. Cole is not in the building today. He flew in last night and went straight to a meeting. May I take it for him? Elena hesitated. Handing over a millionaire's property to a stranger did not sit right. I would rather give it to him directly. Is there a way to reach him? The receptionist shook her head. He does not accept unverified deliveries. I am sorry. So Elena left, dragging the suitcase behind her through the wet cobblestones. Paris felt enormous, indifferent, and she felt ridiculously small, just a freelance artist who had accidentally stepped into someone else's story. By late afternoon, she stopped at a small cafe near the Seine. The rain had turned to a mist, softening the city's edges. She ordered a cup of coffee she could barely afford and opened her sketchbook, the old one she always carried. Lines flowed across the page bridges, rooftops, and reflections. Drawing always steadied her breathing. She did not notice the tall man who entered until he stopped beside her table. "Excuse me," a calm voice said. "You seem to have my suitcase." Elena's hand froze around her pencil. She looked up. The man was exactly as she had imagined from the neat handwriting on the files. Early 30s, sharp suit, presence that filled the space without trying. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and his eyes, gray like steel, studied her with quiet curiosity. "You are Mr. Cole," she said slowly. He nodded. "Adrian Cole. And you must be the kind stranger who rescued my project from airport chaos." Elena flushed. "I am so sorry. I grabbed it by mistake. They all looked the same. I tried to return it." "I know," he interrupted gently, setting a small silver card on the table. "Our security team tracked the tag. I wanted to thank you in person." "You have a security team for luggage?" she asked, half amused, half embarrassed. "For everything," he replied with a faint smile. "May I sit?" She nodded. Adrian sat across from her, the rain whispering against the windows. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "You opened it, did you not?" Her cheeks burned. "Only to check for identification. I swear I did not touch anything else." He chuckled softly. "Good. You might have saved me a week of disaster. That project is launching tomorrow." Something in his tone, grateful yet grounded, surprised her. He was not the arrogant billionaire she had pictured. He asked about her sketchbook, noticing the cityscapes drawn in pencil. When she told him she was a freelance designer barely staying afloat, he listened with genuine interest. "Paris can be cruel to dreamers," he said quietly. "I noticed," she answered, smiling faintly. When the rain eased, Adrian stood and offered his hand. "Let me at least buy you dinner to thank you." "That is not necessary," Elena said quickly. "Maybe not," he replied, "but it would make me feel less like a careless traveler." His eyes held warmth now, something almost human behind the polished exterior. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They walked out together, the street still glistening under the fading light. For the first time in weeks, Elena's laughter slipped free, soft, surprised, real. What she did not know was that Adrian Cole would remember that sound long after he returned to his world of glass towers and endless meetings. Something about her, unfiltered, unguarded, had already begun to change the rhythm of his carefully built life. Later that night, the city of Paris shimmered under a curtain of soft rain. The glow from streetlights rippled across the puddles as Elena walked home alone, her mind spinning faster than the taxis rushing past. Dinner with Adrian Cole had felt nothing like what she expected from a millionaire CEO. There had been no arrogance, no speeches about business or power. He had asked about her work, her art, her dreams, and listened as if every word mattered. When she reached her apartment, she leaned against the door for a long moment, trying to steady the rhythm of her heartbeat. Her sketchbook sat on the table where she had left it that morning. She opened it, expecting to pick up her pencil and forget the entire surreal day. But instead, she found herself sketching a man in a suit, sitting across a caf table, smiling with quiet curiosity. Across the city, Adrian stood by the window of his penthouse suite overlooking the Seine. The rain streaked the glass like brushstrokes. He had meant for the evening to be a polite thank-you dinner, but it had turned into something else, something he could not quite define. Elena's laugh had echoed in his mind the entire drive home. It had been a long time since someone looked at him without seeing headlines, power, or money. She had seen only a man trying to make conversation in the rain. The next morning, Elena's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number read, "Good morning, Elena. I owe you coffee. 3 p.m. Same caf?" Adrian. She stared at the screen, her first instinct telling her to say no. People like him did not chase second meetings with women like her. But curiosity mixed with something softer won. She typed back one word, "All right." By the time she arrived, the sky had cleared. The caf was quieter, sunlight glinting off the river outside. Adrian was already there, sleeves rolled up, phone face down on the table. He stood as she approached. "You came?" he said simply. "I was curious," she admitted. "You do not seem like the type who repeats mistakes." He smiled. "Sometimes mistakes deserve a second look." They talked for hours, about architecture, art, and the way both tried to make sense of chaos. Elena told him about her father, a street painter in Milan who had taught her that beauty was not luxury, it was survival. Adrian listened, eyes softening. You speak like someone who builds worlds, he said. She laughed. I build rent payments, mostly. By the time she glanced at the clock, the sun was already sinking low. I should go, she said. Clients wait for sketches that do not draw themselves. Let me walk you, Adrian offered. They strolled along the Seine, the evening wind carrying the faint scent of coffee and wet stone. Tourists snapped pictures. Street performers sang in broken English, and the river moved slow and steady beside them. Why architecture? She asked suddenly. He thought for a moment before answering. Because buildings outlive people. They carry stories long after we are gone. But lately, I have realized I have been building for numbers, not for people. Elena glanced at him. Maybe you just need to look from a different street corner. Musing. He smiled at that, but his gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. You make it sound simple. It usually is, she replied. People just complicate it. When they reached her building, she turned toward him. Thank you for today. It was unexpected. Unexpected in a good way, I hope? She nodded. In a very good way. He hesitated as if wanting to say something more, but instead, he stepped back. Good night, Elena. Tuan de gun. She watched him disappear down the street, tall and composed, the kind of man who seemed to belong everywhere. Yet tonight, he had looked almost human. Inside her apartment, the lights felt warmer than usual. She dropped her bag and pulled out her sketchbook again. This time, she drew a bridge half in shadow, half in gold. Two figures stood on it, facing opposite directions, but connected by the same light. Across town, Adrian poured himself a drink and stared at the folder labeled Urban Renaissance Project, the same project that had almost vanished in that airport mix-up. On the edge of the folder, he placed a small note. Find a way to include local artists. Ask Elena Rossi. He smiled faintly at his own handwriting, then turned off the light. The city glowed beneath him, alive and endless. For the first time in years, he did not feel alone in it. Somewhere on the other side of the river, Elena closed her sketchbook and whispered to herself, maybe some mistakes really are meant to happen. A week passed before Elena saw him again. Paris had rolled into late spring, the air filled with the hum of scooters and the scent of blooming lilacs. She had thrown herself back into work, sketching designs for a small community mural and trying not to think about gray eyes or quiet smiles across caf tables. Yet somehow, he still lingered like the echo of a song she could not turn off. Then, one afternoon, her phone rang. Miss Rossi? A woman's voice said briskly. This is Valerie, assistant to Mr. Adrian Cole. He would like to invite you to visit one of our new project sites. Tomorrow at 10, if that works for you. Elena blinked, confused. Visit? Why? He said you might have ideas worth seeing in person. When she hung up, she stood in her small apartment staring at the phone. A billionaire CEO wanted her opinion on his project? That could not be real. But curiosity and the faint pulse of something unspoken drew her in. The next morning, she arrived at the construction site on the edge of the city. A vast open area fenced off with steel barriers. Hard hats gleamed under the sun, cranes arched across the skyline, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Adrian stood with his sleeves rolled up, studying blueprints. He looked more alive here, surrounded by noise and purpose. When he saw her, he smiled. You came. You said I might have ideas. I was too shocked to say no, she replied, trying to sound casual. He handed her a helmet. Then let us test your shock. As they walked through the site, he explained the plan. An urban art hub, designed to bring local creators and architects together. She listened, occasionally asking questions, sometimes disagreeing outright. You are building a monument, not a home, she said at one point. It looks perfect on paper, but cold in real life. Adrian glanced at her. Cold? Yes. People will come once, take photos, and leave. You should give them a reason to stay. Add studios, open spaces, color. Let the city breathe inside it. He stopped, looking at her with something between surprise and admiration. You have a way of saying exactly what everyone else is too polite to say. Are gay. That is not always a good thing, she said with a shy smile. It is the best thing, he said softly. The day stretched on. She found herself sketching ideas on the corner of his blueprint, laughing when dust blew into her hair. Workers glanced curiously. No one could recall the last time their CEO looked this unguarded. When evening came, Adrian walked her to a nearby bridge overlooking the river. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the water glimmering below. You have changed how I see this project, he said. Maybe how I see more than that. Elena looked out over the water. You mean because I told you your design was too perfect? He laughed, a sound that felt rare and real. Because you reminded me that perfection is boring. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, comfortable, expectant. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and the warmth in his eyes faded. I am sorry, I have to take this. One? She nodded, stepping aside as he answered. The conversation was short but sharp. His tone shifted, clipped and cold. She caught words like investors, deadlines, funding threat. When he hung up, his face had changed CEO again, not the man who had laughed with her over dust and paint. Trouble? She asked gently. He managed to smile. Part of the job, part of being human too, she said. You do not have to pretend with me. For a second, his eyes softened again. You are dangerous, you know that. How so? You make people forget who they are supposed to be. She tilted her head. Maybe that is exactly what you need. He laughed under his breath. Maybe it is. He offered to drive her home, and she accepted. The car glided through the city as night fell, streetlights streaking across the windows. At her apartment, she hesitated with her hand on the door. Thank you for today, she said, for letting me speak my mind. Shening. I would like it if you kept doing that, he said. Tomorrow, next week, whenever you want. Are you offering me a job? She teased. Something like that, he said. Maybe something better. She smiled, unsure how to respond, and stepped out into the warm night. The car pulled away, its taillights fading down the narrow street. Inside, her heart felt both lighter and heavier. She sat by the window, sketching again, only this time her drawing was not of bridges or buildings. It was of two figures standing side by side, watching a skyline that had started to look a lot like hope. And somewhere across the city, Adrian stared at the same skyline from his office window, wondering when a simple mistake at an airport had begun to feel like destiny. The following days blurred together in a rhythm Elena had never known before. Every morning she received an email from Coal Dynamics meeting schedules, draft plans, requests for her artistic feedback. At first, she thought Adrian's invitation to keep speaking her mind was just a polite gesture. But by the third meeting, she realized he meant it. He listened, argued, asked questions, and then quietly integrated her suggestions into the official plans. Soon, her sketches, once drawn in a small apartment by candlelight, were pinned to the glass walls of one of the biggest companies in Paris. Engineers debated them, designers admired them, and Adrian stood beside her as if she belonged there. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the conference room windows, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "You should present this part yourself." Elena froze. "Me? In front of your board? They need to see what vision looks like, and I am afraid I no longer qualify as an outsider." Her pulse raced. Yet when the presentation began, she surprised herself. She spoke clearly, passionately, tracing lines on the screen with a steady hand. "Cities are not made of glass and steel," she said. "They are made of stories of people who believe they matter." When she finished, there was silence, then applause. Even the most rigid board members nodded with reluctant respect. Adrian smiled at her from across the room, pride flickering in his eyes. Afterward, they walked out into the late afternoon air. "You were brilliant," he said. She laughed nervously. "I was terrified." "Good," he replied. "That means you cared." Lever. They stopped outside the building, where the reflection of the setting sun turned the glass façade into fire. He looked at her, his voice low. "You know, I started this project to rebuild a city block. You made me realize it was supposed to rebuild people too." Elena met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. She wanted to say that he had rebuilt something inside her as well, but the words stayed unspoken. That evening, he offered to show her something. They drove across the river to a half-renovated warehouse that would soon become the art hub. Inside, the air smelled of paint and sawdust. Scaffolding lined the walls, and dust floated in the shafts of golden light. Adrian turned on a small lamp. "You see this corner?" he said. "It will be the community gallery. The first exhibition should be yours." Elena stared at him. "Mine? You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious," he said. "You have a voice worth hearing. Let this place be the first to listen." Emotion caught in her throat. "Why are you doing this?" He paused, hands in his pockets. "Because somewhere between losing my suitcase and finding you, I remembered what purpose feels like." For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Elena whispered, "You do not need to save me, Adrian." He smiled softly. "Maybe you are the one saving me." The moment felt fragile, alive, filled with the kind of energy that made people believe in fate. But before either could say more, A voice echoed from the entrance. "Mr. Cole, the investors from New York are on the line. They insist on speaking with you now." Adrian's expression shifted, the light dimming in his eyes. "Of course," he said quietly. "Give me a minute." He turned to Elena, his voice low. "I have to take this." She nodded. "Go ahead." As he stepped away, his voice hardened again, slipping back into the precise tone of a businessman. She watched from a distance, realizing how easily he carried two worlds, the visionary and the man bound by duty. When the call ended, he looked exhausted. "I am sorry," he said. "They are threatening to pull funding unless we increase commercial space. It means cutting half of the community area." Her eyes widened. "But that was the heart of it. That was the whole point." "I know." His voice was bitter. "They want profit, not people." "Then fight them," she said. "If you do not, this becomes just another cold monument." He stared at her, then exhaled slowly. "You sound like my conscience." "Maybe you need one," she said quietly. Adrian gave a small, tired smile. "You are right. I will try." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of construction faint in the background. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face before stopping himself. "Elena, thank you for reminding me what matters." "Come." She felt her chest tighten, but she managed a smile. "Just make sure they do not destroy what we built." He nodded once. "I will not let them." As she walked home that night, Paris glittered in the distance, beautiful and unpredictable as ever. She felt both exhilarated and afraid of how much this man and his world were beginning to matter to her. And across the river, Adrian stood alone in the half-finished gallery, staring at the sketches pinned to the wall. Among them was one she had drawn of two figures standing on a bridge, one in shadow, one in light. He touched the edge of the paper and whispered to no one, "Maybe I am the one who crossed to the wrong side first." The next week brought a storm both in the sky and inside Adrian's world. Dark clouds rolled over Paris as headlines spread that Cole Dynamics was facing internal pressure from investors. The urban renaissance project, the dream he had built and Elena had helped reshape, was suddenly on the line. Elena found out the same morning everyone else did. The news played on a small television in her favorite cafe. Cole Dynamics faces backlash over non-commercial expansion plans. Her stomach sank. She grabbed her phone and called Adrian, but it went straight to voicemail. That evening, she went to the construction site. Security guards recognized her by now and let her through. The half-built structure stood silent under the drizzle. Inside, Adrian was on the phone, pacing. His suit jacket hung on a chair, and his hair was slightly disheveled, a rare sight for him. When he saw her, he ended the call and exhaled. "You should not be here right now." "I saw the news," she said. "They are trying to stop it, aren't they?" He nodded. "They want me to scale down everything that is not profitable, the studios, the open art spaces, all of it. They think emotion is bad business." Elena stepped closer. "But this was supposed to be about people, about giving the city something real." "I know," he said quietly. "But to them, a city is just numbers." She looked at him, her voice soft but steady. "Then make them see what you see." Adrian laughed under his breath, the sound more tired than amused. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," she said. "Not easy, but simple. Remind them why they trusted you to lead. Go." For a long moment he stared at her, his jaw tightening. Then he said, "If I do this, I might lose everything." "Then at least you will lose it for the right reason." Something in her tone, quiet conviction, unshaken belief, pulled him back from the edge. "You really think I can fix this?" "I think you already know how," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then stepped closer. "You always say things like that like you can see through me." "Tonga." "Maybe I just pay attention," she replied. The air between them felt charged, the rain tapping softly against the unfinished windows. He wanted to reach for her, to say something more, but the sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. His assistant appeared at the doorway. "Mr. Cole, the board is waiting for your decision." Adrian turned back to Elena. "I have to go, but thank you." "Go fight for it," she said. Later that night, Adrian faced the boardroom full of skeptical investors. They expected him to fold, to apologize, to replace art with retail space. Instead, he spoke about people, the ones who built cities, not those who bought them. He showed sketches Elena had drawn, explaining how the project could become a living part of Paris, not just a monument of money. When the meeting ended, silence filled the room. Then one of the senior partners leaned back and said, "You are staking your reputation on a fantasy." Adrian replied simply, "Then let it be a fantasy worth building." He walked out before they could answer. The next morning, Elena woke to an email from him. It contained only one line. Meet me at the gallery site at noon. When she arrived, he was standing in the center of the open atrium, sunlight streaming through the scaffolding. His eyes were tired but bright. I did it, he said. I told them we keep every piece. The art stays, the studios stay. If they pull their money, so be it. Elena's heart swelled with pride. Adrian, that is incredible. He smiled faintly. It is also terrifying. Maybe, she said. But courage usually is. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I realized something last night. Every choice I made for safety kept me from living. You changed that. Chub. Before she could reply, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, her old sketchbook, the one she had accidentally left in his suitcase weeks ago. The pages were worn, the edges bent, but her handwriting was still there. I never returned this, he said softly, because it reminded me what real vision looks like. Elena took it, her eyes stinging. You kept it? I needed it, he said. You helped me remember who I wanted to be. She looked up at him, unable to speak. For a long moment, the world seemed to shrink around them, the hammering, the noise, the city outside fading into silence. Then Adrian said quietly, Elena, I do not know where this goes, but I know I do not want to build anything without you in it. Her breath caught. Are you asking me to stay? I am asking you to believe that some mistakes are meant to happen twice. Elena smiled, tears catching the light. Then maybe this time, let us make it on purpose. She. He laughed softly, and for the first time, the storm over Paris began to clear. The city outside glowed again, alive with possibility just like them. The next few days felt almost unreal. The tension that had hung over the project slowly lifted, replaced by a quiet, determined energy. Workers returned to the site, artists began submitting proposals, and the once-abandoned warehouse started to look alive again. Elena visited every morning, helping with layouts, adding color samples, and sketching murals on the temporary walls. She was exhausted but happy, in a way she had not been for years. Every time she turned around, Adrian was there, sometimes giving instructions to engineers, sometimes simply watching her with that half-smile that made her heart stumble. But success always comes with shadows. One evening, as the sun faded over the Seine, Adrian received a call that froze the air around him. A group of investors had leaked internal documents, accusing him of misusing company funds to support personal ventures. They meant the art hub. By morning, the news spread everywhere. Coal Dynamics CEO under fire for favoring personal relationship in public project. Reporters gathered outside his office, cameras flashing. For the first time, Elena saw how ruthless the business world could be. She rushed to his penthouse, heart pounding. The door opened before she could knock. Adrian looked different, shirt sleeves rolled, tie loosened, a man under siege. You should not be here, he said quietly. I read the headlines, she answered. They are lying. He gave a weary smile. It does not matter. In their eyes, perception is truth. They think I built this project for you. Elena stepped closer. Did you? His eyes met hers. At first, maybe not. But now, yes. I built it because you reminded me that something beautiful can still be honest. Her chest tightened. Then tell them that. Tell the truth. They will not listen. They only see what they want. She hesitated. Then let me speak. Let me tell them what this project really is. Adrian shook his head. If you do, they will destroy you too. She lifted her chin. Let them try. That afternoon, Elena went to the gallery site where several reporters had gathered. Cameras turned as she stepped forward, paint-stained hands trembling slightly. Her voice carried clear in the open air. This project was never about profit. It was about giving people a space to create, to heal, to belong. If you think kindness is weakness, then you have never seen what art can build. Her words spread quickly. Within hours, social media lit up with support. Artists, students, and residents began posting under the hashtag number #LetItBeBuilt. When Adrian saw the messages flood in, he felt something break inside him. Pride, fear, gratitude, all tangled together. That night, he found her on the bridge where everything had begun. You should be furious with me, she said. Why? Because I spoke without asking. He shook his head. Because you spoke the truth when I was too afraid to. The city lights reflected in the water, shimmering gold and endless. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian took her hand gently and said, whatever happens next, we face it together. Elena squeezed his hand back, her voice barely a whisper. Then let them watch. Let them see what a mistake can become. And for the first time, she felt no fear at all. 2 weeks later, Paris woke to headlines that surprised everyone. Coal Dynamics clears investigation. Community Art Hub approved for full launch. The scandal that once threatened to destroy Adrian's reputation had turned into proof of his integrity. The board, forced to face overwhelming public support, had no choice but to reinstate the project exactly as he and Elena had planned. Elena stood at the edge of the nearly finished gallery, watching sunlight pour through the glass ceiling. Workers were painting the final touches on the walls, and her murals had begun to take form, colorful, alive, filled with stories of the city. The space no longer felt like a construction site. It felt like home. Adrian walked in quietly, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled as always. He carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. "The critics are calling it a miracle," he said. She smiled. "No, just the right mistake." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Do you realize you turned an international corporation into an art movement?" "I think we both did," she said. "And besides, miracles are just hard work that finally makes sense." He looked at her for a long moment, his voice softening. "You once told me people complicate things. I think you were right. I made everything harder than it needed to be." She turned toward him. "And what do you plan to do about that?" Adrian hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. "By starting with honesty." He placed something in her hand, a small silver key. She looked down, puzzled. "What is this?" "It is the key to the top floor," he said. "The gallery is finished, but there is one room that is yours. A space for your art, for your classes, for anyone who wants to learn. Call it whatever you like." Elena stared at the key, her throat tightening. "Adrian, you do not have to I want to." He interrupted gently. "You changed what this place means. You changed what I mean." She blinked back tears. "You always know what to say." He smiled faintly. "Only because you make me say it." That evening, as the first exhibition opened, hundreds of people filled the new gallery. Local artists, families, and reporters stood shoulder to shoulder, taking in the transformation of the once empty warehouse. At the center of the main hall hung a sign written in simple black letters, "The Art of Elena Rossi." When she saw it, she froze. "You did not," she whispered. "I did," Adrian said beside her. "This was always meant to be yours." She turned toward him, eyes glistening. "You could have put your name here." He shook his head. "I already have enough buildings with my name on them. I wanted one that meant something." The music swelled as guests applauded, flashes of cameras lighting the air. Adrian reached for her hand, and for once, she did not pull away. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For believing in me when I almost stopped believing in myself." He looked at her, eyes warm and steady. "You were never the one who needed saving, Elena. You were the reason I remembered how to be human." In the center of the crowd, surrounded by light and color, they stood together, 2 lives rewritten by one small mistake at an airport. The applause faded, but their world did not. For the first time, neither of them wanted to leave. A few months later, the city of Paris bloomed into summer. The art hub had become everything they had dreamed of, alive with music, colors, and laughter. Children painted in the courtyard, musicians played by the open doors, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. The building that once stood silent and empty now breathed like a living heart in the center of the city. Elena stood by the window of her studio on the top floor, the same room Adrian had given her. Her hands were covered in streaks of blue paint, and her sketchbook lay open on the table. From her window, she could see the river glimmering under the afternoon sunday. Every day, people passed through the space she had helped build, leaving pieces of themselves behind: drawings, songs, laughter, memories. Behind her, the door opened. Adrian stepped in, holding a small white envelope and that familiar smile that still managed to make her heart race. "You have paint on your face," he said gently. She laughed, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "That is how you know I have been working." He handed her the envelope. "Then maybe it is time to take a break." Inside was a single card that read, "Rooftop, tonight at 7. She raised an eyebrow. "Should I be nervous?" "Not unless you hate surprises," he replied. That evening, the rooftop had been transformed. Soft lights hung between potted olive trees. A table set for 2 overlooked the entire skyline of Paris. As the city shimmered below, Adrian stood waiting in a dark suit, no tie, hands in his pockets. Elena walked toward him, her hair lifted slightly by the wind. "You really outdid yourself," she said. He smiled. "For once, I did not build this to impress anyone. I built it because I wanted to remember this night." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the Eiffel Tower light up in the distance. Then Adrian turned to her, his voice calm but sure. "Elena, when I met you, I thought you were a mistaken accident in an airport, but you became the most deliberate choice of my life." Her breath caught as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring simple, elegant, the same silver tone as the suitcase they had once fought to return. He knelt. "This all began because you picked up the wrong suitcase, but somehow, it led me to the right person. Will you marry me?" Elena's eyes filled with tears as the city lights reflected in them. "You really think mistakes make good beginnings?" Adrian smiled. "Only the best ones." She nodded through a trembling laugh. "Then yes. 1,000 times yes." He stood, sliding the ring onto her finger as applause rose from the rooftop staff who had quietly gathered by the stairwell. The sky above Paris blushed gold and rose. As they kissed, the lights of the city flickered like a promise kept. Around them, the rooftop shimmered with the hum of life music from below, laughter from the streets, and the sound of a new story beginning. Later, as they leaned against the railing watching the city glow, Elena whispered, "You know what the funny part is?" "What?" he asked. "I never got my suitcase back." Adrian laughed softly. Maybe because it was never about what was inside. She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "No, it was about who I found because of it. Tuin." And as the camera of memory faded to black, one final line echoed in her mind. "Maybe grabbing the wrong suitcase was the best mistake I ever made."